is now, because the champ is here.
Make sure y'all stay on point with
The Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? We asked the question before we ended the prediction episode. Will there be closure or will there be more questions? That was literally the final statement that we had. That was what we were going to ask. And we got our answer after this fight. O'Shaquie Foster evens up the score one apiece with a 115-113 split decision victory, two-time 130-pound WBC champion. Now, overall, I've looked into the comments, all right, and there have been a little bit of mixed comments, but overall, everybody feels like the right guy won this fight. And a part of me wants to say that's because of the stigma that they had from the first fight. But I'm going to be honest. In my opinion, I think the fans got it right. I personally had it 115-113 O'Shaquie Foster. I think they were tied within the first four. I think once we got to 10 rounds, I think it was tied 5 apiece. And then I think O'Shaquie Foster took 2 out of 3 of the championship rounds. So that's the way I had it. However, overall, we're going to grade this fight, but this fight was a lot better than the second fight, in my opinion. And on top of that, I feel like it was a lot more competitive. Now, overall, let's get straight into the grading. We're going to start off with strategy. Overall, Breezy, strategy, I got to give it like a 9. I'm going to be honest. Both of these guys came in, they came ready. There wasn't a point in this fight where I was looking at both fighters and I was saying, oh, this guy's really slacking tonight, or this guy's, not on his game. It wasn't like that. I believe that O'Shaquie Foster didn't have as nearly as a dominant performance as he did last fight, but I also believe that's because Robson Conceição came more prepared. And I said this in some older episodes. I can't remember which ones. You're going to have to go look at it. But I always said when Canelo and Triple G in their first fight, when they had the draw, it's a lot easier for the guy who got lucky to do a better job in the second fight around than the guy who got robbed, because the guy who got lucky, he can go back and look at that fight and see all the mistakes that he made. Where opposed to the guy who got robbed, they had a really good performance and it just wasn't, and it didn't go their favor. So in this fight, when we were doing the prediction episode, I said that O'Shaquie Foster was going to win by majority of decision. It was a pretty close to the actual result, although it was split decision. I just needed one judge to see it or draw. That didn't happen. But overall, the reason why I thought this was going to be a lot better than the first fight is because Robson Conceição, being the veteran that he is, he had a lot more to learn in this fight than before. And I feel like he came into this fight with a better game plan. He came into this fight with a better strategy, and I believe that's why it was so close. What I liked about Robson Conceição, I'm going to start off with him, is what worked in the first fight was those straights to the body. He was having a lot of good success to the body, hitting O'Shaquie Foster with body shots. That was the one thing that he had success with in the first fight. The second fight, he went right back to it. His body shots weren't nearly as impactful or powerful. However, he would throw nice straights to the body just to collect punches. He would basically go into the inside, except the difference is if you go back and you look at the first fight, Robson Conceição, he would stay in the inside a little too long, giving O'Shaquie Foster time and opportunities to land a bunch of counter punches. In this fight, what he did was he would take a shot to the body, he would throw a 1-2 combination, he would slip right back out. And O'Shaquie Foster had a lot less opportunities to throw those counter punches and combinations. What I also liked about Robson Conceição was Robson Conceição looked like the prime Robson Conceição that we were used to seeing. We talked about how quick he was in his prime, and we felt like because he was older, he didn't have that same quickness. I'm going to say this right now. I apologize to Robson Conceição because this is the best Robson Conceição has looked in years. I'm going to be honest. This is the best Robson Conceição I have seen in years. He had a lot more footwork. He had a lot more movement. He had a lot more defense than he did in the first fight. And I believe he wasn't taking as many power punches from O'Shaquie Foster that he did the first fight. And I believe that's all credit to Robson Conceição from looking at the first fight and realizing I can't stay on the inside with him that long. I can't keep giving him opportunities to counterpunch me, to basically get shots up on me. He was like, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to land my 2-3 punch combinations. I'm going to slip out. If that body's open, I'm going to hit it. And basically, if he wants to stand in the middle of the ring with me, I'll stay in the middle, but I'm not going to make this a brawl. Robson Conceição did what we said O'Shaquie Foster should have done, which was counterpunch, kind of slip out the way. Now, what I really like about Oshaki Foster was as the rounds were going on, he was able to adapt. What I mean by that was there were times where Oshaki Foster, in my opinion, he looked a little bit too content and too conservative. And as as the later rounds were going, it seemed like he kind of started to pick that up. I like that Oshaki Foster was using his overhand right. That overhand right was definitely a good tool. And on top of that, Oshaki Foster, funny enough, had more success, in my opinion, on the inside than Robson Conceição did. It seemed like they took each other's game plans on what we said and they kind of switched them. It seemed like Oshaki Foster was the better inside fighter and Robson Conceição was the better outside fighter. What I also liked about Oshaki Foster is when there were power punches that were needed to be thrown, in the later rounds he took advantage of it, opposed to the beginning rounds where he could have took advantage of it and he didn't. You know, there was a point, I believe, in the 10th round where he hit Robson Conceição with an overhand right and it rocked him. You know, and everybody's going to talk about the 4th or 5th round where Conceição looked like he got where he stumbled. That wasn't because of a punch. I think that was because Robson Conceição got a little bit too careless and he kind of lost balance. If you go look at it, he really didn't hit him. Conceição was trying to dodge and slip out of a punch and he kind of lost balance. But if we're looking at the 10th round where he got rocked, that was a big round where Oshaki Foster needed to win. And that was a big moment in the fight where he rocked Conceicao. And Conceicao was able to recover, and credit to him. Overall, this was a chess match between two very good boxers. It was a chess match. I do believe that Oshaki Foster could have done more counterpunching because we also talked about how he needed to get a knockout in this fight, and that didn't happen. And I feel like his best route to getting a knockout was through the counterpunching. And for Robson Conceição, I think there were moments where he got a little bit too careless, and there were moments where for like brief moments. It wasn't even too long, but it was just enough time for Oshaki Foster to steal rounds. There were moments where he was kind of going on the inside and going blow for blow with Oshaki Foster. But for the majority of the fight, I mean, I got to give their strategy a 9. Oshaki Foster did his work on the inside, in my opinion. And Robson Conceição did a great job of counterpunching. And towards the end, Oshaki Foster kind of picked up on the counterpunching. And Robson Conceição, you know, picked up enough steam to kind of make this a competitive fight. So overall, I got to give it a 9, man, as far as strategy.
I'll have to give it about a 7. And look, before y'all go in the chat and start getting all Twitter fingers and trigger finger, hear what I have to say. If you go to the first fight, it was the exact same thing. But the only difference is that I feel like Oshaki Foster, I feel like them this time he was more aware. And the first fight, I just felt like he fought him and he tried to box him, but this time it seemed like he just tried to box him, which was going to obviously be the best strategy for him to do. Although I felt he won this fight and whatnot, but at the same time, though, how many of y'all can absolutely say right now that after this performance, he's ready to go up to fight a guy like Tank Davis, potentially go up to a 140? Because I mean, there's been times in the past where he's called out Tank Davis, but nevertheless, different time for a different topic for a different podcast episode. As far as this fight, I mean, he did well. He picked the shots in the inside, but I told y'all too though. I told y'all he's not really that elite in the inside, and that's not no discredit to him. You know, Shaki Foster looked like he was going to hurt Conceicao, like Mario mentioned, but instead that's not really wasn't a knockdown, but more so off of Conceicao being off balance and throwing those punches too. Y'all gotta understand, Conceicao was trying to go to the inside and mix it up. He was trying to go in there and kind of similar do what he did the first fight, but the only difference is this time he was really looking to put a lot of wear and tear more so on that inside than he did in the first fight. First fight was kind of mix of an inside outside, but this time you can tell he really was trying to get his work in the inside. But this time I will say Oshaki Foster was more aware. He did have his guard up this time a lot more. But as far as the later rounds go, I mean, Oshaki Foster he took the later rounds, and I think he needed to really do that. Obviously, we obviously knew they was going to be different this time because they're not going to sit right there and rob the man 2 times in a row. But at the same time, though, he did make sure he take those later rounds, which we always say is most important, the championship rounds, which is 10, 11, and 12. And I felt like between those rounds, O'Shaquie Foster took all three, in my personal honest opinion. Is it his best performance? No. Is there a lot more he needs to work on? Is there a lot more he needs to polish on? Absolutely. But the same can also be said about Conceicao. But that's why, the styles are so alike and so different in many ways. But as far as I'm concerned, I got to give the game plan a 7.
I think that's fair enough. Overall, how do you have the fight graded? Or what would you say would be your grade on it?
Call me crazy. Call me crazy. I gave majority of the rounds to a Shaky Foster. And look, that's not to say that this fight was by any stretch of the imagination robbery or it was this close. I do feel like you can look at it very close, but I do feel like this time he was more so outlanding Robson Conceição more than he did in the first fight. And I think I don't want to say it was a shutout, but you could call it a dominant, but not too dominant or something like a Haney and Cambosos type fight. But as far as just outlanding him and out punching him, as far as that, yeah. But as far as the fight wise, like just fighting in the pocket and just trying to brawl with him, I don't think it was that much of a dominant. But yeah,
Fair enough. Let's go to excitement. Overall, I think this was a very exciting fight. I gotta give it an 8. I think this was a good in my opinion, I looked at it as a good chess match between both of them. And I feel like both of these guys put up a good fight. And there wasn't any like knockdowns or anything crazy like that. But if you're looking at it from a boxing standpoint, if you're looking at it from like the sweet science of boxing, I do think this was an entertaining fight. It wasn't a fight where, in my opinion, where obviously Breezy kind of disagrees a little bit on this, but it's not a fight to me where um it looked like Oshaki Foster dominated. But I do feel like it was a back and forth fight. And I feel like whenever you have a back and forth fight, that's always makes room for an exciting fight as well, especially when you're keeping your eyes glued to the fight because you don't know who's going to win. And it wasn't like these two were just standing waiting for one to make the move. No, there were times where Oshaki Foster would go to engage, and there were times where Conceicao would do the same. There were times where Oshaki Foster had to react, and vice versa with Conceicao. So I feel like with this fight, I got to give it an 8. I feel like I had, in my opinion, I think I had some good excitement to it. And I feel like it was a fight where you had to keep your eyes glued to the screen because you needed to see who was going to pull it out at the end. So overall, I got to give it an 8 as far as excitement.
give it an 8 too. Everybody was banking on O'Shea. Well, I don't want to say everybody, but a vast majority of us as boxing fans was kind of banking on O'Shaquie Foster to go in there and kind of do something very impressive. Especially with the whole robbery situation, that definitely added more steam to the fight. Whether you want to believe it or not, anytime there's a quote unquote robbery in the first fight and there's a rematch, that's going to always kind of be the quote unquote build up to the rematches. Is like the topic goes, will it be revenge or would it be repeat? And I think with the element of a robbery, and then you have some like a O'Shaquie Foster, and then you have a style like Robson Conceição, it just wasn't like a power versus power. It was kind of like a skill for skill type thing. You know, this guy's inside abilities versus this guy's outside abilities. Can this guy's outside abilities equate to him in the inside with his inside abilities? And it's crazy, like Mario said, it seemed like they wanted to go in there and basically switch game plans around, which was kind of like weird to me in a way because I didn't see it going that way either. But at the same time, though, that's what makes it, a great rematch. So as far as excitement, I got to give it an 8. I don't want to say it fully lived up to what I thought it was going to be, but what I will say is it kind of met the bare minimum of what I could expect from a fight like that. So I give it about an 8 too.
I think it was perfectly wrapped up. And overall, it had enough excitement to make it an 8. It was close enough to where it could be an 8. It wasn't a 10 because there wasn't no knockdowns or it wasn't anything crazy like Fury versus Usyk, but it was a good fight. So I got to give it an 8. Now, as far as stakes, they had the WBC belt on the line. I do think the stakes were underratedly high. I'm gonna give the stakes a 7. And the reason why is because you got that WBC championship on the line. Oshaki Foster, a 2-time WBC champion now. Robson Conceição, there was a lot of pressure on him to kind of fix the mistakes that he made in the last fight. And a lot of people didn't look at Robson Conceição the same way. They thought that because he got the robbery, they were looking at him in a negative light. And I feel like with the stakes, I feel like because this fight just happened and Robson Conceição made it a really, really close fight, I feel like Robson Conceicao's stock goes up. I feel like Oshaki Foster now being back at champion at 130 pounds, I feel like you can make a lot of fights now between him and like Navarrete, between him and Oscar Valdez, if you wanted to do that, depending on who wins that fight. There's some good fights you can make in that 130-pound division. So overall, I do think that the stakes were somewhat high. I don't think they were crazy like a 10, but it wasn't like do or die or anything like that. But overall, man, I gotta give the stakes a 7. I think that's a fair place to put it.
The 7 also, and with a division like 130, is there really too many fighters, that can really get that weight division jumping like that? No, not really. But you can still make some kind of pretty much decent matchups. Of course, like he said, the stakes up was coming, was the whole situation with the robbery, of course, the title being on the line. And look, can I just point this out for all you people that's going there, Robson Conceição, please understand, just because a fighter gets a belt off of quote unquote robbery does not necessarily mean that they had anything to do with it. You can't fight a fight and judge a fight at the same damn time. I wish I would stop going at fighters for robberies that they have no control over. I need to stop doing that. Grow up, okay? But as far as I got to give it about a 7. I mean, he got his belt back, which I hate to sound like this, but we kind of was expecting that. Now it's just basically okay. We done moved on past the Robson Conceição chapter. Let's check out the other contender. Let's see who else we can get them. We can get Oshaki up against. But as far as the stakes, it's about a 7. Nothing too exciting, but nothing that, like I said, we didn't expect already.
I feel like that's just the best way to kind of view this fight. It was good, but it wasn't anything we didn't expect. And last but not least, impact. What would you put the impact of this fight at? Now, obviously, if we're looking at it from a pound for pound perspective, it doesn't do nothing for it. Neither of these guys were pound for pound. But if you look at the division, I mean, there is somewhat of an impact here but it's very uncertain. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give the impact a 6, and I'm going to tell you why. So a lot of people might think that's way too low for this fight, but here's the way I look at it. Oshaki Foster is now a WBC champion. Because he just won this again, a lot of people are going to be speculating whether they got to go do the trilogy. And what does that do? It holds the division back. Whenever you have a trilogy, it kind of holds the division back. Now, let's suppose they decide, well, we're not going to do a trilogy right away, and we're going to go after somebody else. Oshaki Foster steps in there with somebody like Navarrete or Valdez. Let's suppose he gets beat. Next thing you know, we never get the trilogy because now all of a sudden we hit a roadblock. So because we're going to eventually have to get to this trilogy, 130-pound division stays where it is. Now, let's suppose Oshaki Foster says, I'm done with this division. I'm going to bump up to 135. Let's just suppose that's what his thought process is. Next thing you know, the WBC championship gets vacated. Then we got to run it back between Robson Conceição and Navarrete. Because if y'all remember, they had a title fight and it came out a draw. And they never ended up getting the rematch. So overall, they would have to run that back. There is an impact in this division, but I don't think it's an impact as big as what people think it is. So overall, man, I mean, I'm going to bump it up to a 6.5, but that's as high as I can give it because I feel like because of this trilogy, we're going to be stuck with a lot of different scenarios that we can make this in this division. And in some ways that's good, but in this case, I think that's bad because I think it kind of prolongs everything. And I think it kind of puts some roadblocks on some potential fights that we would like to see with Foster and Navarrete or Foster and Valdez or some of these 130-pound champions. So overall, I got to give it like a 6.5.
I'll stick to the first one you said and say 6. And look, there's still a lot of missing matchups. I don't even think people really remember, but Robson Conceição fought Oscar Valdez one time, and remember, that was a very controversial decision. We still haven't even got the rematch for that yet. So, of course, we still missing Robson and Navarrete. And, of course, we probably still need Oshaki to run it in with Navarrete, even Oscar Valdez. But I will say this, though. If you're going to move up to 135, you best move to PBC, tap in with Al Heyman. And if you're going to be fighting at that magnitude and whatnot, I don't think you really should be banking on Top Rank because it just seems like you don't have any kind of best interest over there at Top Rank. Try PBC. PBC got a good handful of 135 fights if you do plan up to go up to 135, but that's neither here or there. But I gotta give it a 6. There's so many matchups we're missing, and there's so many matchups we still need to see a rematch for. That it hasn't even been mentioned yet. So I have to give it a 6, respectfully to everybody at that division.
For sure. Now, with that being said, the grade that we are going to give for this fight, I have it right here on my calculator, it is 7.31. I don't believe that is going to defeat Tim Tszyu versus Bakram Murtazaliyev. Now, a lot of people are going to think of that as controversial, but I do think it is below that fight because for as short as the fight was going on between those two, it was exciting. And I feel like the excitement factor and I believe the impact factor was a big reason in that, the big reason why Murtazaliyev and Tim Tszyu were rated higher. But overall, I mean, I believe this fight was better than that fight in terms of styles and strategies. I believe that fight was better in terms of excitement and impact. So their grade was just bigger. And overall, I mean, that's the way it's going to be. It is number 2 on this list. But we got a bunch of other fights that we're going to have to end up grading. Last but not least, before we log off this episode, in your opinion, Breezy, what should O'Shaquie Foster do? Should he go up to 135 or do you want to run that trilogy back? It's up to you, man. What do you want to do? Or you stay at 130 and you challenge Oscar Valdez again or Navarrete. What would you like to see him do?
We already feel he won the first fight. So to say a trilogy would just kind of be like, because it's like, yeah, they gave him the belt, but in our heart, we know and felt that he won that fight. So no, I don't think nobody's really going to ask for a trilogy besides anybody maybe outside of Robson Conceição corner. Like I said, I would like to see him in Navarrete. I would really like to see him versus Oscar Valdez. I feel like that style would kind of be a nice little matchup, especially with, the counter punching ability Oscar Valdez has, and we've seen him with his counter punch knockout that blew the internet away. So I think he can take that route. But like I said, if he's going to move up, get away from Top Rank. Because if you're looking for those 135 pounders, you're going to have to go over there with the PBC. They got a lot of them. They got Frank Martin. Unless you plan to stay over there to fight Lomachenko, but to fight Lomachenko, I don't know how guaranteed that is for you. But as far as if you're going to go to 135, go to the PBC, Pitbull, Frank Martin, Keyshawn down the line. It's so many things he can do if he goes over there. So if he's going to go 135, take that route. But if he's going to stay at 130, easy. Navarrete, Oscar Valdez, and who knows, depending on how those fights can go, you can have rematches with that or even trilogies. But I think he can fairly say that the Robson Conceição chapter is over with. We already felt he won the first fight. He went in there and he handled business this time. So I think it's fair to say this chapter is officially closed. So that's why I feel like O'Shaquie Foster should do.
Alrighty. Oscar Valdez rematch is very good. I agree with you as far as the Conceicao take that you gave. He won the first fight in our eyes. He won this second fight in our eyes. Why do we need to have a third? Okay, I know it's tied 1-1, and a trilogy can happen somewhere down the line. I still think Conceicao has a little bit of years left on him, a little bit of gas in the tank, and I believe that fight could come back around for a unification fight. I think would be bigger for that. And I do believe that if Navarrete beats Valdez again, we're going to see Conceicao versus Navarrete too. And that's going to be a big fight as well. And if Conceicao beats Navarrete, then we can get a unification bout for a trilogy between Foster and Conceicao. However, let's not forget about Anthony Cacace, who just recently defeated Joe Cordina and stopped him. Can't forget about him. So that's a big fight right there. That's going to have to happen. That's one champion. And we're forgetting about one guy who, as of right now, is being set for the biggest payday of his life. You wait after that fight, and I'm telling you, the hype will be there. Yes, we are talking about Lamont Roach. All right. Once Lamont Roach is done with his payday with Tank Davis, you go to PBC and you set that stuff up. Now, Top Rank and Premier Boxing Champions, they got to start collabing more. I'm going to say that right now. They don't collab enough, and they need to start doing it a lot more because there was a lot of talent on both ends. Top Rank's got the young talents. Premier Boxing Champions got some of the biggest stars you can possibly put on pay-per-view. And I believe that when you put those two together, you make a great fight. And Bob Arum has had nothing but respect for our PBC. And overall, I mean, we were supposed to get a collab between Tank Davis and Lomachenko. Then Lomachenko decided that he wasn't going to fight for 2024. So that fight ended up getting canceled. But overall, we got to see Top Rank and Premier Boxing Champions duke it out some more because they don't do it enough. So, I mean, with that being said, I would like to see him. I would like to see Oshaki Foster wait a little bit. And I would like to see him kind of go after Lamont Roach for a unification bout. But if not him, Anthony Kakache wouldn't be too bad. Sorry for pronouncing that last name wrong for y'all in the comments who like to criticize, but Kakache wouldn't be too bad. Or I would like to see Oshaki Foster get the winner of Valdez versus Navarrete. So those would be the two fights that I would like to personally see. But we're gonna have to wait and see. Overall, congratulations to Oshaki Foster, two-time 130-pound WBC champion. As far as Robson Conceição, put up a great fight. You know, it wasn't enough this time, but overall, Robson Conceição proved to me that he's still got some gas left in the tank, and he's not just this old veteran who's, you know, losing to all these champions. I do believe that Conceição has, you know, one little run at the title left in the tank. So overall, we're just gonna have to see what happens with both of those guys. But other than that, we will get to that when there is a fight announced. We will get to that when it is time to get to that. And that's the reason why you should be tuning in to the Puncher's Point. We're going to make sure that we let you guys know what happens in this 130-pound division because not many people are talking about this 130-pound division. Not many people are talking about the topics that we are talking about over here. And on top of that, nobody's doing like we're doing it. I'm telling you this right now. We are a podcast, a boxing podcast that you have never seen before. We are a boxing media that you have never seen before. And I'm not saying that because this is our podcast. You give me a boxing podcast that is running their own magazine. You give me a boxing podcast that is giving you 3 takeaways after every episode. You give me a boxing podcast that is grading fights like we're doing. They're not doing it like us. They're doing we're different. I'm not saying we're better, but we are different. And that is the reason why you should be tuning in to the Puncher's Point. And that is the reason why y'all should stay on point with the Puncher's Point. What's up, y'all? If y'all love this episode, make sure y'all subscribe. You hit that notifications button and also take a look at the recent episodes that we made before this. Make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.